now.
Good morning. We are now going to start our combined hearing, Streets and Services and Education. Mr. McMonaghan, will please read the title of the bill.
Resolution number 160109, resolution authorizing a joint public hearing between Council's committees on Streets and Services and Committee on Education to investigate the allocation of funds from the revenues generated by the red light camera enforcement program and the parking meter rate increase that took effect in 2014, as well as the costs associated with administering these programs. And our first, I'm sorry, Councilman O, I think, has a statement.
Before, I guess we'll bring up Rob DeVoe from Finance. But before that, I'd like to announce who's present. We have Councilwoman Gim, Councilwoman Bass, Co-Chair, Councilwoman Blackwell, and Councilman O. Before we start, is there any opening statements? Councilman O?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'll just make a brief statement that at this time the city is considering a 3 cents per ounce soda tax. We have also administered a $2 per pack cigarette tax because the state did not provide us the funding for the schools that we needed, but authorized us to tax cigarettes. We have, for several years in a row, raised property tax, and we are now challenged again, mainly because of the problems with the schools and our challenges in getting adequate funding. At the same time, the Parking Authority, which is a essential and very effective authority here in Philadelphia for administering parking, shared spaces, public safety, has been taken over by the state, and since that time has had expanded roles through state enactments. The portion of the funds that the city gets is based on a formula, and a portion that the school gets is also based on a formula, but we're unclear as to what that formula is, how to project the revenues that we can anticipate, and we're not sure, at least certainly as council members, what the interaction has been between the administration and the PPA. So the red light cameras have been rumored to support the schools, which I found is not the case, and there was a 50 cent increase of meters in surrounding areas outside of Center City that was supposed to increase revenues for the schools, and it appears it has not fully done that, or maybe not at all. We're not really sure. And so at this point in time, I would like to investigate the revenues of the Parking Authority and what exactly it is and is not funding in and outside of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman O. Mr. DeVoe, do you have any testimony?
I do. Thank you.
Please state.
Can I read the bucket list?
Oh, okay. Excuse me one more second, Councilman O.
Yes, I apologize, but I've been asked to read or asked to read the statement of Alan Bukovitz, the controller. He's stuck in traffic, but I think his statement is important for the conversation we may have. Office of the City Controller, City of Philadelphia, Alan Bukovitz, Joint Committees on Streets and Services and Education, April 29, 2016, submitted testimony. The Office of the City Controller in 2009 conducted a performance audit on select operations of the Philadelphia Parking Authority, parentheses PPA, close parentheses. The audit was performed at the request of the Office of the Governor, since the Controller's Office has limited auditing authority over the state-operated entity. The identified areas of inquiry included Center City garages, airport parking operations, salary costs, on-street parking operations, profitability, new parking authority responsibilities, and contracted services. A summary of the findings by category were as follows. Center City garages, increases in administrative expenses significantly outpaces increase in operating revenues over the 6-year period ended March 2008. Airport parking operation. Inconsistent approval protocol exists for the issuance of free parking passes to PPA personnel and the Division of Aviation. Salary costs. No consistently in preparing staffing plans to demonstrate the need for all personnel currently employed. On-street parking operations. No documented policies and procedures for the determination of payment amounts due to the City and School District of Philadelphia. Profitability. The revenue bond activity significantly diminishes its profitability. Interest on debt was 43.4% of total expenses on average. The industry average was 28%. New responsibilities. Management did not prepare revenue and expense projections beyond 1 year. Contracted services. Management could not produce a comprehensive list of contracts. The PPA responded to the Controller's Office's findings and indicated that at the time, it had already begun implementing processes and procedures that would enable the PPA to implement appropriate recommendations. The Controller's has not conducted a similar follow-up revenue. This would require the approval of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, e.g., the Office of the Governor, as was provided in the 2009 audit. The Controller's Office would be willing to work with City Council in any manner as it moves forward with examining PPA revenues and/or policies and procedures. That was the submitted testimony of Alan Bukovitz. As I said, he's in traffic. He may or may not get here in time to testify. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilman O. Please state your name for the record and then proceed.
Good morning, Chairperson Squilla, Chairperson Blackwell, Councilman O, and other members of the Joint Committee. I'm Rob Dubo, Director of Finance, and I'm here to offer testimony regarding Resolution Number 160109, which authorizes investigation into the allocation of funds from the revenues generated by red light camera enforcement program and the parking meter rate increase that took effect in 2014. And what I'm really going to focus on is the amount of money that comes to the city. We receive revenue from the Parking Authority for on-street parking violations, for Parking Authority operated garages and parking at the airport. On-street parking revenues distributed in accordance with Act 9. From fiscal 04 through 15, the city's received about $700 million from the Parking Authority. Revenues from the red light camera enforcement program are transferred to the state and then redistributed in a process that Acting Commissioner Carroll will describe in more detail in his written statement. In terms of our interactions with the Parking Authority, we meet with them regularly, with the Executive Director and top staff, and go through their financial statements. That concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. DeBoe. Is there any questions, Councilman O?
Thank you very much,
Before
Chair.
that, I'm sorry, let me just announce two present at the hearing is Councilman Townsberry. Continue, Councilman O.
Thank you very much. Your testimony is that the Finance Department meets regularly with the Executive Director of the Parking Authority and members of his senior team to review financial statements.
That's correct.
Who represents the city in these meetings?
It's people from my office, from Finance.
Do you yourself attend these meetings?
I do.
Okay. And is anyone there from the school district?
There has typically not been someone there from the school district, although Mr. Fennerty, Mr. Monson, and I talked 10 minutes ago and agreed that it would make sense for the school district to be at those meetings.
Oh, in the future, the school district
Yes.
will be present. Okay,
Yeah.
that's progress, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So up till now, the school district has not been present, and does your staff kind of act in somewhat with their interest in mind?
We do. We are obviously concerned about the amount of revenue that goes to the district.
Right. However much money they don't receive, we usually end up having to foot the bill. No?
We're not their only funding source, and we're not the only, asking us for money is not the only way they balance their budget. So.
Okay. So however much or however little the school district receives is not of concern when you meet with the Parking Authority?
It is. That's a different question from what you just asked.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What I said before is we are concerned about that. But I don't think it's a fair characterization to say that if they get $3 million less from the parking authority, the city makes all of that up. That was all I was saying.
Okay, understood. Are you satisfied that you're well-versed in the financial information and operations of the parking authority as concerns what portion of money the city receives?
I think I have a kind of I think I know during the course of the year how that's looking, what it looks like we'll receive and what it looks like the district will receive.
Okay. And I have received financial information from your office.
Correct.
Yes, okay. So since the time that the parking authority has been taken over by the state, 2001, what is the total amount of revenues that PPA has collected?
So revenues go back to 2004, and I can tell you what's transferred to us. I can't tell you the total amount they've collected because they have expenses too, and their revenues first go to cover their expenses, and then what's left comes to the city up to a cap, and then above that it goes to the district. But since that time, between our general fund and our aviation fund, it's been $705.7 million.
I do see that, but I do also, I have seen a sheet that reflects the total amount of revenues collected from PPA.
I think I'm about to get that sheet.
Or maybe maybe that is,
Oh, okay.
well,
So I have that sheet now.
okay. Could you tell me what that is?
So that sheet shows total parking authority revenues and then the percent of the total that's received by the city. It shows in general, and I haven't validated these numbers, so I'm just reading the sheet, that the percent of revenues that come to the city varies between a little under 26% and 32%.
Okay, and that's covering the years 2010 to 2015, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so the total revenues collected, according to my calculations, is $1.374 billion. Total payment to the city for that 5-year period is $394.8 million, leaving $980 million that did not come to the city. Does that seem about right to you?
Well, that excludes the airport number, so I don't know whether the revenues that you're looking at are all revenues or whether those revenues exclude the airport too. But if you include the airport revenues that come to the city, it's about $706 million.
Okay, $706 million. So you are correct. So it's somewhere around $980 million.
980 million, sorry, you lost me there.
1.374 billion minus 394.8 million. Add the amounts of money from
I guess I'm not sure. I mean,
what I did in my calculation.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that column that says total PPA includes aviation revenue. It does. So then the difference is more like 600 million, right? It's that 1.3 that you're saying minus the 700.
Okay, so what happened is the source of this chart is City of Philadelphia Finance Department, Philadelphia Parking Authority financial statement. So this is from your department. I read it as parking violations, other PPA, Love Park, airport parking, total to the city, 705 million.
Right.
So that is a total.
Yes.
So taking those numbers against the total collected by the parking authority.
Which you said was 1.3? that what you said, 1.3 billion?
1.374 billion?
Yeah, so if you subtract 700 million from that, it's about 600 million.
No, it would be 980 million.
You're subtracting 700 from 1.3 billion?
No, I'm subtracting 394.8 million, which is the total amount that was made in terms of payments to the city. Just for the years, not the 705, just
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
for 2010 to 2015.
Got it, okay.
So it's the only numbers that were provided.
understand, okay.
I would have given you more, but, so for that 5-year period, 1.374 billion was collected in total by the parking authority. 394.8 million was delivered to the city, leaving $980 million that was not delivered to the city. So do those numbers seem correct to you?
I think you have to subtract out the amount that went to the school district above that, which is probably about another 50 million or so over that period.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the city. Wherever that money went, whatever happened to it, at this point in time, I'm only saying,
But the numbers are generally, they're in the right ballpark.
okay. So did you have a calculation of what amount of money you anticipated receiving from the parking authority
For those 5 years,
for those 5 years?
I would have to go back, and we could go back and look at the 5-year plan from 5 years ago and see
Okay.
what the numbers were, but I didn't know that would be a question, so I don't have that with me.
So when you do your 5-year plan, do you anticipate how much money you will
Yeah, we
receive?
put in an amount each year for revenue from the parking authority.
And did these numbers fairly match the amount that you
Yes.
anticipated?
Yes,
And is that based on a calculation of prior amounts of money you received?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and growth off those amounts.
Okay. And have you looked at the operating costs or the bond issuances or the interest rates in determining how much money you should anticipate collecting? Or do you just kind of average out the amounts of money you've been receiving over the past few years and just project out?
Right, so the city portion is capped, so we just assume that we're going to hit that cap every year, and that the real variable for the things you're talking about is what goes to the school district.
Okay, so when you say cap, what you're talking about,
There's an inflation adjustment every year.
35 million?
35 million with an inflation adjustment, so it goes up a little each year.
Is that for total revenues, including airport?
No, that's just
for
from parking.
From off-street parking?
right.
On-street parking, I'm sorry,
Yes.
on-street parking. So that portion is on-street parking only.
That's right.
And so you're going to receive about 35 million and whatever the difference is according to the formula. And as long as you receive that money, you're pretty much okay.
The city's general fund is pretty much okay.
Okay.
We're still concerned about what goes to the school district.
Goes into the school district, okay. When I look at 2015 and I compare it to 2012, 127 million was collected in 2015, 124 million was collected in 2012. 36 million was paid to this city in 2015, 37 million was paid to the city in 2012. 11 million was paid to the school district in 2015, almost 14 million was paid to the school district in 2012.
Yeah.
So,
I actually show 36 million coming to the city in 12 and 37 and a half in 15.
so I have a report, source Philadelphia Parking Authority Financial Statements, City of Philadelphia Law Department, FY 2013. And according to this sheet, under the column 2012, the parking authority's total expenses was $68.784 million. The city received $37.3 million, and the school district $13.9 million. I'm comparing that to the column 2015, where the expense of the parking authority is about 10 million higher, 78.2 million, with an increase of 6.473 million for administrative expenses and direct operating expenses. But the amount to the city and school district is lower, 36.4 million, 11.0 million. So although the operating cost was 10 million less in 2012, the amount received is lower in 2015 than 2012. Are we on one sheet of music now?
So I think where we're might be slightly different is the numbers that I have on this sheet are
Yes.
based on the city's fiscal year. The parking authority has a different fiscal year, so there might be slight differences. So I have actually us receiving more money in 15 than in 12 by about $1 million.
Do I have that? Do I have that sheet?
You should. We did supply that.
You have that? So we have the difference?
Yes, this is what Rob wrote. Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, I do see the difference. There is a difference, slight
And it
difference.
may be just the fiscal year
numbers.
difference.
Well, it's not actually a slight difference. It's about $1 million
Right,
difference.
both years, it's about,
Okay,
so it flips it from being lower in 15 to being higher.
okay. Can you explain the difference?
Why it went, the difference between the
Yeah.
numbers you have and the numbers I have, I think it's that one is a March to March fiscal year and one's a June to June, but.
No, not the difference. My question is, as you are in these meetings in the finance sector, do you understand the difference in why the city is receiving a certain amount of money and the school district a certain amount of money in 2012 versus 2015? The increase in expense?
So a few
decrease in-
things I think drive expenses for the parking authority, and they'll be able to explain it better than I will, but
Yes.
one is weather-related. So in a year with more snow, they're going to collect less revenue. One is their personnel costs, particularly their pension costs. I think those are increasing faster than revenues. I think between 2012 and 2015, they had a new collective bargaining agreement, so that would have affected their costs. You know also that they made investments in meters, they're actually not in kiosks, so I think that increased their costs. So I think there are a number of things that have affected their costs over time, and then their revenues are affected by things like the weather.
So they collected more revenues in 2015 than 2012, 13, or 14. So if there was a weather-related issue, I could understand why it would increase their operating expense, perhaps, maybe some equipment expense, but they did collect more revenues. The direct and administrative expenses did increase significantly by 10 million, by 6.4 million. The money to the city decreased, and I understand that there may be greater expenditures, but I'm not aware of it. But if you're aware of it, then would you share that with us?
Yeah, we can,
Okay,
yes.
okay, fantastic. Are you able to explain on the history of general fund parking authority revenue chart provided by City of Philadelphia Finance Department, the drop in 2005 and 2006 of parking violation revenues, which for some reason it was at 25 million in 2004, sharply decreased in 2005 and 6 to 14 million, 18 million, and then went back up to
Yeah,
24 and continued to rise.
I think there was a legislative change then. That's kind of before I was in this position, but I think there was a legislative change. I think that the Parking Authority will be able to explain that better.
Okay. So you are aware of these numbers, is kind of, I guess, what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, and you're comfortable with the numbers? Is that yes?
I didn't know what you mean, comfortable that they're accurate?
Well, just in general, you see no reason to ask questions or to...
We ask questions about them all the time. I mean,
Okay.
so if we see, as we see that, and it's really the school district portion is going to be lower than anticipated, we ask what's happening with that.
Okay.
I mean, and that's what our meetings are about. It's kind of going through these numbers and asking what's going on with them.
Are you aware of the Controller's 2009 audit report?
I'm aware of it. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Okay. And I'm gathering from your testimony that the city is generally satisfied. In other words, you have not told me you have any concerns or you're pursuing any other avenues. You don't anticipate that you should have received more revenues. You're just generally satisfied that what you're getting is what you should be getting.
Satisfied that the numbers are accurate. I mean, and that they are consistent with what the law requires.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Jim?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Morning.
So, I think that in part this hearing is important to listen to a little bit because of the ways in which the Parking Authority revenue has changed over time. And I was glad to hear that for the first time, the school district will be at the table in the discussions around it. And in part, it's because it feels to some extent that there hasn't been close attention paid to where the school district how dramatically the school district revenue has been impacted. So in a couple of years ago, the Parking Authority obviously hit its peak between 2007 to 2013 school year with an increase between $2 million up to $13.9 million. 2 years later, it saw a 30% drop in its school district revenues. And then for next year in FY17, it's projected at $8 million, which is a dramatic drop of more than 40% in its school district revenues that are going to the district. At the same time, though, the city revenue has stayed fairly steady or has increased over that period of time. And so I think that the hope is that the city would understand why the Education Committee would be concerned about the fact that while the city revenues are fairly steady, the school district revenues are clearly going down and are projected to decline at a dramatic rate that doesn't seem to be in occurrence with the on-street revenues of the Parking Authority. So that's kind of what...
Oh, yeah, and we definitely understand and share the concern. And I actually think that the Parking Authority does too, and actually are thinking of ideas of how to increase that revenue.
I'm sure they're thinking of ideas for increasing revenue. However, we're also here because the Parking Authority does seek opportunities for revenue, including a bill being negotiated around a surcharge on tax and ride sharing and any additional revenue if it has trouble meeting its obligations to the school district or the city, but primarily the school district. It seems to be pretty aware that it needs to meet a responsible amount of money of growth to the city of Philadelphia, has not had a problem meeting it. But when it comes to the school district of Philadelphia, particularly because district officials may not be at the table, there seems to be a fairly erratic approach where it's all over the place. And, it's been questioned before. And it's my understanding that you use the numbers that are provided by the Parking Authority itself. Is that correct? Do you have an independent audit of the Parking Authority that you rely upon, separate from the Parking Authority's numbers?
No, I mean, we meet with them, we go through the numbers, we ask questions about them. but we don't hire someone to do an independent audit of them.
And is that audit is basically a standard revenues operating budget kind of audit? It's not a performance audit, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And when was the last time that you were aware that either the city or the school district or the parking authority had ever done a performance audit on its operations and management?
So I think the Controller's Office has done audits that looked at that too, so I think that was probably the last time.
And that the controller, unfortunately, he's not here today to answer some of the questions, but I know that in the past, there's been requests to do more comprehensive performance audits that may not have been up his bailiwick. He seems to indicate that it is a state-run agency. He has limited ability to review it. In that particular case, would the state auditor general be able to do a performance audit of the parking authority?
I assume that would be the entity.
And has
who
the
would do
city
it.
ever asked the state auditor general to do a performance audit?
No, not to my knowledge.
Did you ever feel like it was necessary to do one?
So performance audits, in general, are good to happen periodically. So, I think it's not a bad idea.
One of the reasons why I ask is because obviously the school district revenues are different from general parking authority revenues. So the school district revenues primarily come from the on-street revenues from the parking authority. And when you look at the total revenue increases from on-street parking revenues, and they go up about 11% between 2011 and 2015. Meanwhile, as I said, the school district of Philadelphia revenues have plummeted 40% over that time period. When you look at the Philadelphia Parking Authority expenses over that same time period between 2011 and 2015, they've increased about 14%, which doesn't sound, too much different, except if you look at administrative expenses. And administrative expenses under the Parking Authority have increased by 55%, which is a significant sum. And it's in part why I would ask whether there's been targeted questioning of the Parking Authority about its increases, in particular in that area.
So I think the biggest increases for them have been, one, on pensions, two, investments in their infrastructure, and then the third, a couple of years ago, they had a new collective bargaining agreement, I think after a while not having one, and so there were some increases related to that. They can give you more details, but I think that's where the increases come from.
And are those administrative expenses, pensions?
The way they allocate it, some of them would show up in administrative costs, yes.
Good to know. So one of the other questions that I had was also about how you see the PPA expenses as percentage of revenue are now 61% expenses of the on-street revenue parking. And that, I guess, is where I'm asking that that's a significant sum of money that impacts greatly its ability to deliver its responsibilities to the school district.
I'm not sure what the question is.
I don't think there's a question.
Okay.
I think it's just more that asking when the city and the school district sit down together, that while I understand that the city is paying attention to the parking authority, I think that its acceptance of its numbers minus performance audits and other types of independent sources of information may cause it not to be able to be as strong of an advocate for the school district as it may need to be.
I think we do advocate for the district, but I also think having the district at the table will help.
And advocating for the school district has resulted in a 40% decline.
Well, and I've explained what happened with their costs.
Are you explaining on behalf of the parking authority, or are you explaining that?
I'm explaining what we've seen. You've asked kind of where we paid attention, and you've asked me what happened, and so I've explained what
Based on the parking authority's information, though. I mean, I guess one of the questions that my colleague has asked is whether there's any genuine concern, and whether we think that there's a need for more independent information outside of what the city is automatically accepting.
So automatically accepting, I think, is strong. We've spent is why we meet with them, to go through their numbers. I don't think we automatically accept their numbers. That's part of the reason we meet with them. It's not like we get a piece of paper and say, thanks. You know, we question their numbers, and we have an understanding of what's driven those increases.
So well, I wouldn't say that it's a matter of accepting the numbers and saying thanks. I think the matter is that the numbers aren't changing on the school district behalf. I think I said this very directly to Mr. Fenerty, that a lot of us wouldn't have this kind of inquiry had the school district revenue stayed steady and seen the kind of general gradual increase around it, and that there was a significant amount of attention paid to it. But it does seem that there is a particularly loose interpretation of the parking authority's obligations to the school district of Philadelphia. I agree with you that I think having the school district at the table will be helpful, and we'll be looking to make sure that there's some change that happens. But it would be helpful to note that between 2011 to FY 2017, and actually projected into 2016, since the parking authority's revenues for 2016 are projected at a lower rate than last year's at FY 2015, will go from 11 down to 10.2, according to the last parking authority board meeting, that it just remains a point of concern, and it's a wish that from City Council's aspect, that the city administration just pay and is rigorous, and also raising alarm bells if you're seeing dramatic changes in the parking authority revenue.
Yeah, and we do pay close attention to it, and we do raise the issue if it doesn't look like those revenues are going up.
You raise them with who?
We raise them with the parking authority, and we also let the school district know.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sorry, I will have a follow-up question.
Councilman O?
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't ask you this, but concerning the 2009 audit, and I know that was years ago, but it does say under profitability, the revenue bond activity significantly diminishes its profitability. Interest on debt was 43.4% of total expenses on average. The industry average was 28%. Are you aware of that?
Where that one of the things that happened is that they've issued bonds, and those bonds have a cost, and that decreases their net revenue? Yes.
Yes.
And that's what I was talking about with the investment in the kiosks.
Yes, and that, according to the controller's audit, it was significantly higher at 43.4% than the industry average at 28%.
Yeah, that may be because of an older infrastructure. I'm not sure. They may be able to answer that better.
Yes, and I can ask them, but, the reason I'm asking you is because you're the finance director. We have issues about uncollected taxes and inefficiencies in city government, and now we're looking at more taxes to cover new programs, and, the question is, are we getting all the revenues that we're supposed to get in a situation such as this, where there's some kind of relationship between the city and the parking authority and the state, and somewhere out there is a school district? I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you could not, nor your department, give me detailed information. For example, I'm looking at a category called credit card. I got another category called other. $500,000 here, something like that. I'm assuming, and I'm saying, you could correct me, that you could not, nor your department, go through the exact expenditures as they occurred.
So when we meet with the parking authority, we go through those lines and look at changes in each line, and if there's a change that raises questions for us, we ask about it, and then figure out what's going on. That's part of what the meetings are about.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman O. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, can we have, is Mr. Munson from the school district here to testify? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. DeBow, if you could just hang for a little bit in case there's any questions, we appreciate it. Just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Sure. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Ori Monson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Philadelphia School District. I'm pleased to present testimony regarding the annual payments the district receives from the Parking Authority. Included in my testimony today, which I believe was circulated, is a chart which shows the history of revenues received from the Parking Authority since the 07-08 fiscal year. As you can see from the chart, the revenue amounts increased steadily through fiscal year 11-12 to a peak of more than $13.9 million, and then were cut 2 years later by 30% to just over $9.7 million. For the current year, we've projected the same amount as received in fiscal year 14-15, just over $11 million, and for fiscal year 17, we have now budgeted $8 million. We are aware that Council approved an increase in certain fees and fines to the Parking Authority in October 13. At the time, the Parking Authority estimated that the increases could result in an additional $2 million per year for the district. In fact, the very next year, our funding from the authority was cut by $3.5 million. One of the concerns for the district is that we cannot accurately budget the amount of funds we will receive. There is no direct link between various sources of Parking Authority revenues and the funds ultimately distributed to the district. We have no ability to question the derivation of the figures. In April 2014, the Executive Director of the Parking Authority testified before City Council that the increase in parking meter and kiosk rates would, quote, result in an additional $7.5 million for the schools. Based primarily on those comments, we projected receipts in 14-15 of nearly $19.5 million. We received less than 11.1. Even more frustrating is the lack of communication between the Parking Authority and the district. A perfect illustration of the lack of communication occurred a few weeks ago. On March 23rd, we learned from an article in the Notebook that the Parking Authority was projecting to reduce its payment to the district in 2017 by $3 million. That was the day before we presented our proposed lump sum budget for fiscal year 17. Prior notice of the estimate would have been helpful in our budget process, as that budget actually included an $11 million estimate, and we needed to reduce it for $8 million for final approval last night. Mr. DeBoe had mentioned earlier that just before this meeting, the district will now be invited to their periodic meetings, so I'm looking forward to attending those meetings and be able to ask questions. That concludes my testimony for you this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gimm?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Monson. Glad to have
Morning.
you here. Thank you very much. So I just want to highlight a couple of points in your testimony, which I think were particularly striking. One, that you found out about the $8 million, the decline for FY17 of $8 million by reading it in a newspaper. Is that accurate?
That is
That there
correct.
was no communication directly with you from the Parking Authority?
That is correct.
Was there also no communication with you from the City of Philadelphia?
That is correct.
Second of all, the comment that the Executive Director of the Parking Authority made in his April 2014 City Council testimony, that when he promised that when City Council approved a meter rate increase and kiosk rate increases would push an additional $7.5 million to the public schools, we actually never saw that money. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we still have yet to see that?
Correct.
Okay. And then the third point being that you project, based on what you had hoped, was that 2014-2015 revenues from the Parking Authority, FY 2016 revenues from the Parking Authority would match 2014-2015 revenues from the Parking Authority of $11 million. In fact, when we went to the Parking Authority board meeting this week, we were informed that that was a projection, the FY 16 projection was about $10.2 million. Had you heard anything like that at all?
We had not.
Okay. And that FY 17 will now go down another amount to $8 million.
That's correct. That number we had from the previous board meeting as reported in the article.
One of my questions is, and I believe that your previous role in the city was as the executive director of PICA a few
Not
years
for
back.
the city, but yes, I was
Yes,
executive
I'm
director.
sorry,
Yeah.
that's right. Not for
Yes.
the city of Philadelphia, for the independent PICA entity. But do you have any theories about why you would have seen such a dramatic drop-off in the revenues? I mean, as having looked at finances before and being certainly aware of this distribution, do you have any thoughts on what the dramatic drop-off could be due to?
So there are always some factors, and I know some have been mentioned already, and these can have an impact. And I did go back, obviously I was not in this role previously. I went back to some previous communication between the city and the school district, my predecessor in the role. And they did discuss that, obviously my predecessor had questioned the large drop-off for 13-14. Among the reasons given were some snow issues, some changes in legislation, beginning of increases in pension payments, and also that the authority had distributed over $1 million in bonuses to its employees.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What was the last point that you said?
That the authority had distributed about $1 million in bonuses to its employees.
$1 million in bonuses to employees?
Correct.
At a time when it had seen a significant drop-off in its revenues to the school district?
Apparently.
Are you aware of if that practice continues?
I have no idea. I only have that one discussion between my predecessor and the city.
Would it be possible to even see that based on the type of audits that the parking authority currently gives? Or would that have to be seen through some kind of a performance audit and a much more deeper analysis?
A performance audit or a forensic audit would actually probably show the extent of those practices. I don't believe it's apparent from the standard financial documents.
So I find that to be extremely troubling, and I think that that's important for my colleagues to know. Most importantly, because City Council did approve a parking rate hike increase, meter increases and other types of things that were impactful on our residents and our citizens under the guise that it would give a significant amount of money for our schools. Under that rate, we should have seen back only in 2015 alone, at least $19.5 million, I think you testified to. Is that right, Mr. Munson?
That was the amount the district budgeted at the time based on those comments.
Based on those comments, that we should have seen revenues of $19.5 million. In fact, we saw a significant amount less, that we received less than $11.1 million for that time period. So do you feel like it would be, have you ever seen any kind of independent audit other than what the parking authority itself provides? What numbers do you use to gauge or predict what the revenue is for the school district?
All we are able to do is look at past trend and then any information we get from the city as to their discussions of if there's any change in projections, I guess we could send people to the board meetings. We have not done that previously, though it may be worthwhile for us to start doing that as well.
They're really fun. So the other, I mean, if you sit down with the parking authority and the city, that will be the first time that you're aware that the school district has actually been at the table since the money started coming to the school district in 2007?
To my knowledge.
Is that to your knowledge? Yeah.
Correct.
And I understand that you just started in February, so I appreciate all of the questions that we're peppering at you. And then, in your opinion, are there particular, one other area that I'm curious about was whether the school district had any kind of role around the current legislation that's moving through Harrisburg right now on the surcharge on ride-sharing services, for example. The original Senate bill, in my understanding, saw the surcharge on ride-share services for companies like Uber and Lyft to be a revenue boost for the school district of Philadelphia. Was that your understanding?
Yes, the original language, I believe, about 2/3 of the revenues was supposed to go to the district and 1/3 to the authority.
And did the district have any voice around any of the legislation or had been talking with it, or are you around the table at all with legislators on this issue?
We were aware of it. We had been apprised of it when it was first proposed, and it was consistent with our continued goal of achieving sustainable recurring revenues to allow us to offset our increase in costs.
And when did you become aware that the legislation was changing as it went from the Senate to the House?
I believe about a week ago, a week and a half ago.
And that's consistent with what we were hearing, that the legislation was changing dramatically, and instead of being a revenue boost for the school district of Philadelphia, in fact, it was a diversion of money back into the parking authority's funds, that it would separate out from what could be available for the school district. Is that understanding?
Characterize it as it sort of actually made it mirror what the current situation is that we're the last one. We basically get the leftovers, how I describe it. So there's the money for the parking authority to administer the programs, and then if there's anything left over that amount, which according to most calculations, there would not have been anything else.
I don't think the parking authority is known as a lean agency necessarily in the bureaucratic fund, compared to the school district of Philadelphia, which I think operates at, 3% overhead or something. I think parking authority expenses are 61%, but anyway. So one of my questions is this idea that the parking authority taking $4 million, which would require Uber and Lyft to become a $235 million entity operation here in Philadelphia. That seems excessive to me. It seems like it would be very difficult to imagine that the parking authority would need $4 million to operate oversight of Uber and Lyft. I don't expect you to respond. Thank you. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Munson, one question. I know you mentioned about the bonuses I guess the parking authority gave and therefore reduced the school district's amount of money received?
That was an explanation that was provided by the city for one of the contributing factors to the reduction in revenues we received in 14.
And was that contractual? Was that like through a union contract or?
I have no knowledge of how the authority operates or that program. I have an email.
Okay, so you don't know why
no.
that was something they had to do, or is that was something that was done?
That's something the authority could speak to, not I.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Councilman Tannenberger and then Kaltenberger.
I wanted to follow up on that, but it seems like, Mr. Munson, in all respect, you don't know. I'd like to call Mr. Chairman, Mr. DeBoe back to the table. Good morning, Mr. DeBoe. And
Good morning.
the question as it relates to the bonuses, were they part of labor contract negotiations?
There were collective bargaining agreements that increased costs for the parking authority.
And they were part of that contractual, they were actually obligated. So in
They
some
were-
ways, they were not bonuses, they were actually part
I
of
think there were pay raises. I don't actually remember whether there were bonuses too, but there were pay increases
They were
as part
pay
of that
increases
collective bargaining agreement.
because of contractual obligations to our unions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
sure.
Councilman now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've seen your projections, perhaps by way of city financials, in our discussions about the budget. And as I understand it, the school district shows a surplus or a positive balance because of funds that were not spent that should have been spent. Famously, counselors, nurses, teachers, that type of thing. And so the school district has not come to the city to ask for more money this year. But at the same time, in 2019, the school district is indicating that it will be in a deficit of $139 million approximately. 2020, $375 million, and 2021, $600 million. Is that about right?
That's about right, yes. Numbers were slightly adjusted before our budget adoption last night because of some changes in revenue projections, but we're projecting, I believe now it's about $570 million negative fund balance by the end of 21.
And you have communicated to the city of Philadelphia the predicament that you're in with declining or anticipated need for revenues. Is that correct?
Correct. We've shared all of our information with the city and with City Council.
And in 2023, the PICA wage tax sunsets, and although I know, I'll speak for the finance director, they're going to work on it, and I have no reason to doubt him, but according to his testimony, the city would be short $350 million a year as a result of the sunsetting of the PICA portion of the wage tax. And in your previous role, you're well aware of this.
Yes.
Okay. And I have had these discussions with Mr. DeBow that I actually want to see the wage tax reduced in Philadelphia. And there may be a difference opinion, but trying to get the wage tax to continue at that rate. But I certainly am concerned when the school district needs $600 million, a cigarette, taxes are sunsetting, the PICA wage tax is setting, hopefully, from my opinion, to make our city more competitive, but we will need money. What has been the discussion from the school district's portion around how this money is going to arrive at the school district?
So in our 5-year plan, and when we testified before City Council, and actually in all of our public and private discussions with elected officials, our goal for this year, as you mentioned, we do not have a specific ask of the city from a monetary point of view. Our goal was to lay out what, under current law, is the situation we face with expenditures growing at twice the rate of revenues, and as you noted, leads to that nearly $600 million deficit. Our goal is to have conversations with all of our funders, the city, the state, federal, private funders, to help us not under the glare of a budget hearing or when everyone's feeling the pressure of budget, but to have a serious discussion about what the long-term fiscal needs are of the school district in order to maintain the investment that we believe is necessary in educating the children.
Has the city, up till today, indicated to you a funding source to meet the anticipated shortfall based on the fact that there's a history of limited funds from the state?
We have not had those discussions, no.
Okay. I have raised in public my concerns that, we operate in 5-year budgets, and we also operate in 4-year terms. So basically, through years 16 to 19 is the first term of this administration, 20 to 23 is the second term, and then we get a new mayor. That is just about the time where everything sunsets and all these, debts occur, and it would be nice to have consistent leadership in the process of this, critical time, but, we have a limitation on how many terms the mayor can serve, and therefore we're going to go through a transition. So under those circumstances, it would appear to me that there's a great concern to ensure that we have the revenues to maintain K through 12, whatever programs we're going to do, pre-K is fine, but just it appears to me that there's a huge hole in both the city and the school district looming ahead with no identified sources of revenue.
I actually think the problem is more acute in that I don't think in terms of 4 or 5 year, I think
Acute means worse, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
What's worse?
So, I think too often in budgeting any of these issues, and it's true of any government, we actually tend to think in terms of 1-year increments in dealing with the issue right in front of us. It's the reason we wanted to lay out that even though we do not have a fiscal crisis this year, we have a long-term one, and we want to have those discussions now to deal with the long-term issues. So our goal is to get out of the 1-year cycle of talking about it and really look forward at what are the likely results of current law, current revenue streams, current expenditure trends, and be able to have those discussions. So I agree with you that they need to be long-term discussions. I think the problem is we tend to think in 1 year when we need to be thinking in 4 and 5 year would actually be a step forward, I think, for government in general.
Okay, I have one question which I hate to pose to you to put you on the hot spot here, but it's, I think, a kind of you know or you don't know. We have an SRC. The SRC is appointed ultimately by the state. The SRC, I would hope, would be engaged with our state legislature and the governor's office and hopefully our mayor around long-term planning and some of the legislation that is going to occur in Harrisburg, whether it's the PICA sunsetting, the wage tax portion, or Uber and Lyft, or anything to do with what portion of the revenues collected by PPA are directed outside of the city of Philadelphia, not to the school district of Philadelphia. To your knowledge, are these conversations going on?
I can actually, when Dr. Neff, Chair of the SRC, was here with us during the council hearings, she spoke to that very issue and the fact that they are very aware of it, very supportive of the way we presented the budget. They believe that the issues are real, and they fully support our approach to seeing this as a long-term problem that would best be dealt with now, and they are very active in bringing these issues in their conversations with legislators and conversations with the city, with council, and she stated all that to that effect before council, so yes, I believe that's the answer.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. She basically is confirming your approach to this fiscal issue, is how I read the situation.
I believe the SRC and the school district have all been in comments last night at the hearing where the budget was adopted. We did adopt it in the context of the 5-year plan. All of the commissioners at various points raised questions about the concerns of the long-term disparity between revenues and expenditures, that they saw it as a concern, and they saw it as an issue to be dealt with and discussed with all of our funders.
Thank you very much. I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, is there anyone else here to testify on this resolution?
Next witness is Inspector.
Oh, Parking Authority.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any testimony offered from the Parking Authority?
Good morning, Chairman Squilla, Chairman Blackwell, and members of City Council. We have no testimony to offer at this time at the opening. We are here to answer any questions which this committee may have.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just have a couple questions. How do you decide on where the money goes to the city or the school district, and who makes those decisions?
That is decided by statute, and I'm going to turn this over to Deputy Executive Director Rick Dixon, who is to my right, and also this is Corinne O'Connor, who is a Deputy Executive Director.
You said by
also.
statute?
It's by statute, yes, sir.
Is that state law?
Yes, sir.
If I may expand on that a little bit.
Just state your name again.
Richard Dixon.
There seems to be some understanding that the parking authority is this monolithic agency and all of the money is put in a big pot and then we figure out where it goes. There are actually 20 separate business units in the parking authority, every one of which has a different set of either laws, regulations, or contracts that determine where the funds for those, from those entities go. So, for example, the on-street parking program, which is the largest and is taking up most of the conversation today, there's a law passed by the state. We've included that in the folder that you have, and it says red light camera enforcement. The pink section in there has the law that determines both how the red light camera revenue is distributed as well as the on-street parking revenue is distributed. All the money that's raised from airport parking operations under federal law must go to the Division of Aviation. The garage that we operate at 2nd and Sansom is owned by the federal government. Revenue from that goes back to the federal government. So there are numerous different ways in which the money that come into the parking authority are distributed. Every one of those are based on either law, regulation, or contract. Does that answer your question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it does, and I was just curious, I mean, because a lot of questions we get is, you know, how do you decide where the money comes, how much goes to the city, how much goes to the school? And I know last year when we did increase fees, and I think this year we're looking to do the same thing to raise additional dollars. How do you decide when to do that, and how do you figure out tickets compared to meter fees?
Our mission, our primary responsibility is to create an environment where people can actually do business in the city of Philadelphia. Our mission, our goal is to create parking availability for people, because without that, all of the businesses that try to operate here are going to have a very difficult time. So we look at parking conditions on the street and make recommendations as to whether the occupancy rate is too high or too low, violation rates are too high or too low, and then make recommendations to City Council to determine whether or not we need to either raise meter rates or increase fines in order to increase compliance or to create additional vacancies. We've done that several times in the past. We are in the process of reviewing many of those things right now to determine whether or not it's an appropriate time to do that based on sound parking management principles. At the same time, we recognize that there are implications on those decisions as to the money that's available both for the City of Philadelphia and to the School District of Philadelphia. We're sort of in the schizophrenic environment. On the one hand, we're called the most ruthlessly efficient agency in the city of Philadelphia. That's from everybody that gets a parking ticket, and we're vipers sucking the blood out of the economy. On the other hand, there are demands from the money that we generate from them and to fund very significant, important city programs, and from those we are bloated bureaucrats that are also like draining the money that's supposed to go to school children. I promise you neither of those are correct, but at the same time we have to balance both what the parking management goals are and what the demands on our money, and work with the city council, who ultimately decides what those prices will be, because we cannot unilaterally make any changes in the revenue sources. That's only done through an action of city council. So we work with you primarily through the Streets and Services Committee to try to find out what that balance might be.
Another question, because I was at a meeting last night, and it's been done in Pittsburgh and other municipalities where they have entertainment districts, and is it possible in any way to raise rates in certain areas? Not like, I know we have a Center City district that has higher rates than residential areas, but entertainment districts, and then be able to use those additional resources. If we say, this area's price instead of $2 an hour, it's $3 an hour, and that money could then be earmarked towards safety or security or anything like that. Is there any way that the parking authority could do something like that?
Under the provisions of the law as it exists now, all of the revenue-generating portions of the on-street parking program are
are gathered, and then the expenses from running that operation are deducted. And based on the law, there is the initial portion goes to the city of Philadelphia, and whatever is left after that goes to the school district of Philadelphia. The amount given to the city is set by statute. It was $35 million in 2014, adjusted by the rate of growth of gross revenue of the program. So it was, the $35 million is based on 2014 revenue. Because there was an increase in gross revenue into the next year, the portion of the cities went up to 36-point-some million dollars. The issue the result of that in some cases is because I need some water. I'm sorry. The city portion when the city portion goes up and the pot of money stays the same, the result is a negative impact on the amount that's available for the school district. But no, we cannot specify from on-street parking revenue under current law that it can be only used for security or anything like that. All of those funds go to the school district or the city general fund.
Anytime you raise the rates, the additional money over the city dollars goes to the school district.
When we raise any increase in revenue from the on-street parking program, whether it's from meter rates or fines or any of that, is gathered in the on-street program. The expenses are deducted, and the balance goes either to the school, first to the general fund, and then to the school district. It's not, you can't segregate out and say, one of the questions that was raised earlier, there was a 50-cent increase in neighborhood commercial district and meter rates. That generated $1.3 million a year in additional revenue. That went into the on-street operating funds and was used to increase the amount of money that's available after the expenses are collected to go to either the city or the school district.
Okay.
And Mr. Squilla, when the gross revenue rises, that brings the amount paid to the city first higher, and then the split occurs. Whenever there is a gross revenue increase, the money, by the statute, the money goes to, the split goes higher to the city and then to the school district.
So that is through the state statute?
Yes, sir.
And it has to be done that way?
And it has to be done.
Okay. Now, do you consult with the city or the school district on these budget issues?
We meet with the city finance director every other month, and I assure you that his questioning is rigorous. We go through line by line the operating statement for that fiscal year to date. He sometimes questions specific line items that have variances greater than we would expect. We're asked to provide more detail, which we do, so that there are thorough discussions about the status of the on-street parking budget, the airport parking budget, at every other month when we meet with the finance director and his staff.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Tottenberg?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Fennerty, can you explain to this committee how the parking authority is structured?
How it is structured?
Yes.
That's easily done. The parking authority structure is the management reports to a board of directors, which has a chairman. There is an executive director. There are two deputy executive directors, a general counsel, and several senior directors who manage the parking authority. As Mr. Dixon earlier said, there are many different business entities. Okay, each is directed by a statute, an ordinance, or an agreement on how we run it, and each has a different profitability center. The executive director and the senior staff report to the board at the board meeting each month. Okay, we report our profitability, we report what is going on, and take recommendations from our board. We also interact with members of City Council and testify in front of City Council on any and all ordinances or questions that the Parking Authority has. I will take the liberty, if I may, Mr. Tottenberger, to say that I have reported to the board about the drop in revenue for next year and this year. There are reasons for it, and I have reported that the primary reasons for the drop in revenue for this fiscal year to just over $10 million were 3 items: the pension plan, the papal visit, of which Center City was basically shut down for a week or more, and the blizzard, which the city was shut down and there was no enforcement for 5 full days. There are still costs associated with a blizzard. The employees, if we're closed, are paid, or if not, they're not put in the street, they're trained. There's snow removal costs, and we assist the city in clearing small streets. So it's a big loss when we do close down on anything like that. We knew that this revenue impact was going to have a hit on the school district. We have came up with remedial measures on how to increase it. We have discussed that with the administration, and we have discussed it with our board. We have discussed it with Chairman Squilla, and we're waiting for answers on exactly how we're going to tackle that from council and from the administration. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Dixon if he needs to elaborate any further.
Well,
No.
you have indicated that the costs are directed by statute. But as far as accounting and bank accounts and so on, is it really just one pool of money, or do all these statutes have their own separate accounts that are highly defined?
All have their separate accounts. Okay. They all have their separate accounts. Everything is audited every year. The red light camera program has a separate audit. The taxi and limousine division has a separate audit. I would ask Mr. Dixon to take 2 minutes and explain when you're done, Mr. Tautenberger, exactly what we've enclosed for the council members present here today to review in the volumes of paperwork we have distributed.
Mr. Fennerty, it's Councilman Tautenberger. I worked real hard for this title.
I'm sorry.
Technology, for example, like Meter Up and the kiosk, have they improved your efficiency?
Excuse me?
The technology, for example, Meter Up, something it was unveiled
Yes.
just recently by the city, and also the kiosks, have you found them to improve your efficiency?
Yes, we have. The kiosks, okay, which were laid out several years ago, I'll let Mr. Dixon elaborate more on that, have become more efficient. They offer different payment options, credit cards, debit cards, cash or coin. They're easier, and they're easier to use than regular meters, and you know exactly when your time runs out. Basically, when you bring in more modern technology, your tickets go down sometimes, because our object is not to write tickets. Our object is to force parking turnover so people do not stay in the streets all day long, and they observe a time limit. As far as Meter Up is basically, Meter Up is our brand. What we call Meter Up is it's pay by cell. It's known as pay by cell. We did a trial period for 6 months. This summer, it's going to expand citywide, and you can pay by your cell phone, and each time you repay, it doubles to an area where it's $3. It can go up to $9 an hour. That was approved by City Council. We do expect a drop in tickets as it goes on, but an increase in meter revenue. And we only did it in a pilot program because we have learned from poor decisions in the past. We only went with a small area, we tested it, and now we're going to expand it.
So if I get this right, with Meter Up, I could be sitting in my favorite restaurant and all of a sudden realize, hey, I better get that meter squared away, and I can do it all by phone, never leaving the table.
You will actually get a notice on your cell phone telling you have, I believe, it's 15? You have 7 minutes left on your time. Would you like to renew, and how much would you like to renew for?
Right.
That would have asked a question, also answered a question Chairman Squilla asked. New technology, can the parking meters or the kiosks be regulated differently? Okay. They can be regulated differently. You can pay from sitting in your restaurant or your doctor's office, etc., and you can repay, I believe, up to 3 times. It will cost you a lot more per hour, but that is for the convenience of not getting a parking ticket of $36 or more.
If I can just elaborate briefly on that. In addition to the public service that these technologies provide, which are incredibly important and very good, and important in encouraging economic activity in the city, they've also improved our efficiency to the extent that we've been able to cut the number of meter collectors that are necessary to go out to collect coins out of the meters. We have been able to, in addition to just the meter technology, we have some mobile devices, mobile digital devices that electronically capture license plates in residential permit parking blocks, which are it's very difficult to enforce all of those blocks. Some of them have been spread out. Over the last 10 years, we have probably added 500 additional residential permit parking blocks. One of the difficulties with doing that is it's incredibly labor-intensive to walk up and down those streets to try to ensure that there's compliance with those regulations. We've begun a pilot program to use mobile technology where a vehicle drives up and down the street and it's able to determine the length of stay of those vehicles so that we can actually improve the efficiency with which those enforcement activities take place. Since that, most of these technology things happened around 2009, 10. The on-street parking program has been able to reduce its staff by 56 people as a result of the employment of these technologies.
Mr. Dixon, thank you. You had mentioned some earlier, but are there factors that, on a yearly basis, now, Chris, the papal visit is something very special indeed, and, well, I don't think it'll happen again in another 20 or 30 years. But are there factors that go beyond the control that impact your revenue, the money that is available for the City of Philadelphia and the School District of Philadelphia?
The on-street parking program in particular is impacted by, number one, weather, snow emergencies, any kind of winter weather event. The snowstorm we had in January, we were basically closed down for a week. In other years, there have been multiple snow events that have cost significant amounts of money. The papal event was a fabulous event for the city. I think we looked terrific. But the reality is there was no economic activity from parking happening for over a week in Center City, Philadelphia. That's $1 million. The result of that has an impact on the money that's available for both the city services and the school district services. That's not to say that those things shouldn't happen, because they have other kinds of positive economic benefits, but there is a cost to doing that as well.
So in really just getting the sense of this, you're really, in many ways, subjected to weather conditions as far as collection.
Exactly.
Forget special events, which do happen, but weather is a factor, right, as well.
And weather is a factor in two regards. Number one, it results in a decrease in revenue. And number two, we have extraordinary demands on our staff to enforce snow emergency routes, to tow vehicles that are parked in snow emergency routes, to help with cleaning. For several years, we have deployed our equipment to help the city in cleaning small streets. So it has both a cost factor and a reduced revenue factor.
Yeah, that's actually, as part of my closing remarks to you and any other questions I might have, I want to thank you for your staff, Mr. Fennerty, who has helped out the city in emergency situations. I think that's a very good case in point, where you're actually helping remove snow from small streets. I think your staff has done a pretty good job over the years in helping out this city. I thank you also for the additional paperwork here. I think that we have probably have in here any kind of questions we might be remaining. I will have to say I'm very saddened. I was going to help my wife around the house this weekend, but I think I now have some reading assignments.
A few less trees in Fairmount Park.
Well, they didn't come out of Fairmount Park, because that'll start a whole other investigation committee. But I also would like to thank your line employees, the folks that actually have boots on the ground that enforce the parking regulations. Because in my experience, having served the United States Congressman Charlie Doherty, City Councilwoman Joan Krajewski on her staff, and Chief of Staff to City Councilman Jack Kelly, and now I'm elected in my own right, I have never in this town heard someone who deserved a parking ticket. It just doesn't exist. There's never been one that somebody says, I deserve that ticket. There's always an excuse, and sometimes, unfortunately, I believe your staff gets the brunt of that in yelling and screaming and gnashing, literally gnashing of teeth. I thank you for your service. I thank you for accommodating us today, and I thank you for all this information. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Fennerty did ask if I would just say what the information that we provided. I'll just take 30 seconds to do that and then respond to any questions that you have. There are two folders that have red light camera information. One is the ordinance, the state law that governs how that program operates. There's a spreadsheet of all of the revenue and expenses coming from red light camera from its inception in 2006 through 2016. We also have the annual reports from the red light camera program that go to the Secretary of Transportation, and the annual audits from the red light camera program. So I know that was one of the focuses of this conversation, although it really has no impact on the revenue to the school district. In the longer folder is information pertaining to the on-street parking program and some airport parking information. It has the payments to the city, school district, and airport from 1997 through the current fiscal year. The fiscal year that ended March 31st. The only reason it says forecast on there is the audit has not been completed, so there could be some minor audit adjustments, but I don't anticipate many of those. Behind that, the larger piece of paper are all the year-end statements with all of the line items of revenue and expenses for the on-street parking program from 2004 through 2016. There was a question about the impact of the 50-cent increase in neighborhood commercial strips. That's behind that. That was the one instance where we did have to add 2 meter coin collectors because the areas in which this impact was implemented only has single-space meters, so that we don't get the benefit of credit cards or other kinds of payment options there. So 2 additional coin collectors were added to address that. Full-year revenue is about almost $1.4 million from that, and the cost of the 2 collectors with benefits is about $120,000. After that, there's another spreadsheet that from 1992, this got cut off, I apologize. It should be 1992 through 2016. If you go behind that, there's a graph. One of the things that I think was important to look at was what percent of our gross revenue is being transferred to the city and school district from airport funds, and you'll see that there are plenty of peaks and valleys, but since 2004, for the most part, there has been an increase in an increasing percent of revenue. It's now at 36% of gross revenue. One of the issues that we face, particularly on street parking program, is that it is a labor-intensive activity. I don't know of any way to enforce parking regulations other than people on the street other than that area where we said was just strictly a time limit regulation. And I think many businesses in Philadelphia would be really happy to get a 36 to 40% return on their revenue profit margin. So that's something that I think that we work really hard to improve that. I would just say one more thing. I sort of can't stop myself here. The 2012-13, almost $14 million in revenue, we were clear that year with both the city and the school district that there was almost a perfect storm. All of the good things happened at one time. We had just implemented a major increase in meter rates and parking ticket fines. We had real progress in reducing our workers' compensation claims, and we're able to reduce reserve funds by $1 million. We had virtually no winter weather events at all. So yes, there was a huge increase in revenue that was turned over. The problem with our success is that now becomes the baseline from which everyone expects us to grow. That would be nice, and we would like to be able to do that. It's not always realistic. So we focus in all of our budget preparations and the decisions that we make in the negotiation of salaries and things like that to ensure that we operate as efficiently as we can. And I want to respond to the issue that was raised about bonuses. There are no bonuses issued by the Philadelphia Parking Authority to any of our employees. What was referenced was the negotiation of a labor contract with District Councils 33 and 47 that provided a one-time signing bonus for the ratification of those agreements. Actually, the bonuses that were negotiated by the Philadelphia Parking Authority were slightly less than those that were offered by the City of Philadelphia for the same represented employees. So I don't want to leave the impression out there that all of a sudden everybody at the Parking Authority is getting bonuses. There are no bonuses issued to employees of the Philadelphia Parking Authority other than those that were negotiated in labor agreements. So that's what that was.
And just to clarify that point, wasn't that after a period of time that there were no salary increases at all for any?
For a period of, I think it was 4 years.
4 years
that
of
salaries were
no
frozen.
salary increases at all?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon, thank you for the addendum, the very complete report you just gave, and appreciate it.
Councilman Tautenberger,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Thank you,
I went through many campaigns with you, so I do know you have earned that title. I just wanted to,
Thank you.
and are very proud of that title. I just would like to add that I just did give out one other handout, which there were some questions, and I think they've all been answered about red light cameras, how the profits of red light cameras are given out. It's best clarified in an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer, which ran about 2 weeks ago. There was $5.6 million in red light camera profits that were sent by Philadelphia to the Department of Transportation. And it's always been asked, how does the money, what percentage of the money comes back? There was an agreement made many years ago, okay, that 50% of the money which is sent to PennDOT would come back and to the city of Philadelphia in transportation enhancement grants. Originally, the fund was set up where some of it would come back for only Roosevelt Boulevard. The prior administration asked that it be into a transportation fund. The fund was never set up, or the disbursement method was never set up, okay, for several years, which it should have been set up under when former Deputy Mayor Ryan Cutler worked for PennDOT. I went to a hearing in front of the House Transportation Committee many years ago at the request of Mayor Nutter with, okay, Deputy Mayor Cutler. And what came out of it is that they would consider a 50-50 split. Okay, 50% goes statewide, 50% come back to the city. A committee was set up, which I believe, I don't have full working knowledge of it, is 4 representatives from the city, and I believe 4 or 5 representatives from PennDOT. They evaluate the grants, and the city gets 50% back, as long as they put in for the grants. And obviously, the committee, and I believe Mike Carroll is on it, and a few others, not sure of the members from the city, It was in another newspaper article a couple weeks ago. I couldn't locate that one. They are sitting, 50% of it comes back. You can read the article. I would hope council would feel comfortable and have the understanding that this is how the red light camera statute is. It has nothing to do with money for the school district. We did make some suggestions to the legislature of different ways. Percentages would go out based on how many red light camera tickets were issued in Pennsylvania, look at another percentage. But then the committee had come back and said, well, we get more people going into Philadelphia than you have coming up to our county, so that wasn't a fair split. And this is what was decided on. This is what came up. I wish all the money stayed here, but I don't have a vote in Harrisburg.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Galtenberger. Councilman Ginn.
Thank you very much. I want to be clear about why I'm here. I'm here in part because I said very clearly that had the parking authority held to its own projections of revenue and made a commitment and met its own projections to the school district of Philadelphia, we wouldn't have a problem. I wouldn't have a problem, at least. In 2004, when the parking authority was taken over, you made a clear statement that money would go towards schools. It wasn't until parents got involved in 2007 that changed from $0 to what we were seeing starting to become an increasing number of schools. In 2014, when you asked and lobbied at council to raise meter rates and kiosk rates for the citizens of Philadelphia, you promised that money would go towards schools. An additional $7.5 million of money would go towards schools. And we have not seen that. We've seen money decline on a dramatic scale. Whether or not you have the reasons for doing so, you are not able to hold to your own projections. That is the concern that I have with the entity. That you make promises that you are not then able to keep and that they are specific to the school district of Philadelphia whose revenues have been negotiated by you, as opposed to, which would seem to be a smarter role, to be encoded and enshrined in state law. When they are enshrined in state law, you are able to meet those obligations. When they are not, they become negotiable. So one of the questions is that in 2007, Governor Rendell called for an audit of the parking authority in 2007. The controller did a very limited one. He even refused, it was so limited, he refused to call it an audit in 2009. I mean, my belief is that taxpayers were promised an audit years ago. They deserve not a basic audit of the parking authority. I have no doubt that you have numbers that you can run and reports that you can produce. But the question is whether taxpayers are deserving of a performance and or a forensic audit of the parking authority. Have you done one since 2007 or 2009?
There has not been an independent forensic audit. We regularly internally review staffing requirements. We regularly review changes in demands on our time and our staff to determine appropriate staffing levels. We report every quarter to the finance director by position the number of people that we have in each of those, each job classification. As I mentioned earlier, when we implement new technology, we determine exactly what the impact of that is in terms of increasing or decreasing staff. Since 2010, overall, the authority has reduced 73 full-time positions, so it's not as if we're not paying attention to those things.
Understood.
There has not, as I said up front, there has not been an independent outside audit of the authorities, forensic audit, as you said. There are annual financial audits, which you
Understood. And it was my opinion, and when Governor Rendell called for an audit of the parking authority, he was looking at a desk audit, a forensic audit, or a management type of audit, performance management type of audit of the parking authority back in 2007. And it's my feeling still that taxpayers still deserve that kind of audit. I mean, you yourself used the words bloated bureaucrats, vipers sucking blood out of the economy. I mean, you understand that those were whatever you agreed that they were maybe not ones that you would adopt, but you said them yourself as words that you understand the reputation being out there. Thus, the question would be, would you be open to considering some kind of a management evaluation that is independent of the parking authority? And maybe that could be performed by an entity that is affiliated with the city, like I'm just thinking that even when the school district was going through things and needed to be independently evaluated, it agreed to have regular quarterly reports done by PFM, Public Finance Management, which is a local entity and company that is here in Philadelphia. They are very well known, and they're frequently used when there are questions about an agency's performance. And what they provide is not so much, the School District of Philadelphia also did plenty of audits. They did regularly restricted and cut back on staffing, talked a lot, but what they needed was an independent outside firm looking at them with more objective eyes about how to look at practices and procedures that were fairly ingrained in the school district in order to come up with a better approach towards management. And would you be open to considering that?
That's a policy decision that would have to be discussed by the board, and you've raised that issue, and I'm sure that they will discuss it.
Thank you. The second question is, so the School District of Philadelphia will now be involved in meetings that you have between the Parking Authority and the city as you discuss revenues, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how often do you have those meetings?
Every other month.
Every other month. And then what kinds of things do you project? Do you project like quarterly projections on revenues?
We look at the current status of both revenue and expenses based on what the fiscal year expectations are.
And so I am really encouraged, and I absolutely want to know that the school district will be present at each and every one of those bi-monthly meetings. I think it's long overdue and an important aspect towards it. And hoping also that when I go to the school district that we'll be asking for some of those reports to become public, in part because we have an intergovernmental authority agreement between the school district and city council. We should also be tracking this money as well. We want to pay attention to funds that are going towards the school district of Philadelphia. It does have an impact. This year, parents and families had to ask for hydration stations and water access in schools that cost less than $1 million. So I said this before, small amounts of money make a big difference in a school district because we can actually make change with those amounts of money.
May I just respond to that? Those statements are given to the finance director every month. We meet every other month, but every month he gets a statement of the status of the operation of the on-street parking division, the airport parking division, the red light camera division, the independent small garage, each of which have financial relationships with the city. So every month, he gets the monthly statement with the line items that you see in the statement that I provided to you today. And if there are any issues that appear inconsistent with what his expectations are, he asks for detailed responses to
Mr. Dixon, I'm
that.
aware of that, but the intergovernmental authority agreement is between the school district of Philadelphia and city council, and those are different entities. So I believe that the city finance director is present at those meetings. We're fully aware of that. He does come before city council. But the difference is that the school district being at the table allows city council to ensure that the parking authority is holding true to its promises and is on projection to make that happen. So it is a different entity that we're dealing with in a different agreement, which is partly why I raised it. So the third issue that I wanted to kind of talk about with you a little bit was why your projections are so off. Like, why was it in 2014 you said that meter increases and kiosk increases would bring $7.5 million to the school district of Philadelphia? You're clear pretty much, I mean, that's a pretty specific number to me. And based on that, in 2015, you would have raised $19.5 million. I assume that by 2017, instead of the $8 million that you project, we would have seen kind of a rounding out in that area, around the 19. Even if you were at 18 million, I would have been like okay with that. But it's just striking to me that when you are so precise in April of 2014 saying that $7.5 million will actually go to the School District of Philadelphia in increased revenues, that suddenly in the ensuing 24 months or so, or not even 24 months, but 20 months or so, suddenly all these things spin out of your control, no one could predict, it's impossible to happen. And while I'm not disagreeing and am not at all interested in going through point by point how many snow days you had, whether the papal visit had an impact, I'm just curious about why you were so far off in those projections. Why control and projection of income for you is precise at the moment when you are asking for the rate increase in the meter rates, but somehow as soon as a year-to-year hits, you just spin out of control, nothing that you can predict, it's impossible to know. And in part, it's because you may come before us again for something like this. And I have serious concerns about your ability to do long-term fiscal planning and accurate fiscal planning. This was something that was raised in the Controller's report in 2009, so this isn't something that is an opinion or anything, but is something that was clearly raised with you already before. So could you talk a little bit about what happened in 20 months that made such a specific increase go so wildly off mark? So from $19.5 million projected revenues in 2015 to $8 million actual projected revenues in 2017, $10 million as of FY16.
Well, that's, first of all, the rate increase...
Not a point-by-point type of discussion, just a general understanding of what went wrong.
A point-by-point discussion is really pretty important to try to determine how this works.
Well, why don't we do first this?
So let's talk about where the rate increase began.
I understand, Mr. Dixon. Do you acknowledge that you are wrong in April of 2014?
No. In April of 2014, we raised the revenue 50 cents an hour only in the neighborhood commercial strips. In 2012, we proposed a larger increase in meter revenue, and in the year prior to that, 2011, meter revenue, on the information I just provided, was $28 million. It is now $37 million.
I'm not debating you on what your revenues were. Your statement in April 2014 from Vince Fenerty was not about what revenues would be raised. It was about $7.5 million would go to the School District of Philadelphia. Were you accurate?
With all due respect, Mr. Dixon answered that question, and I would ask the chair to direct Councilwoman Jim to let Mr. Dixon do a point-by-point response. I think we are due that respect.
Our expectation was that our meter revenue would increase by that amount, and it has gone from, what did I say, $28 million to $37 million. It's a $9 million increase over the period of time. During that time, it is inconceivable that there would not have been expense increases related to that. What we had no ability to anticipate was from 2011, we were making a pension payment of $7 million a year to the city, to the pension plan. It's now almost $13 million a year. We had no ability to anticipate that. We came in with all sincerity, with an expectation that our rates of increase on our expenses would be relatively consistent to what it was before. The pension costs since 2004, pension costs have gone up almost 340%. That's not something that we had any ability to anticipate.
My question was, you testified before City Council in April of 2014 that the increase in parking meter and kiosk rates would, quote, result in an additional $7.5 million for the schools. Were you accurate?
We believed, with the information that we had at that time, that would have happened. And if we had normal rates of increases, primarily in pension costs, I believe we would have met those goals.
So you are not accurate? You did not meet the $7.5 million projection that you promised in April 2014?
No.
Okay, thank you. So can you comment more broadly about what it is that is unique about the parking authority's ability to be so specific on revenues for schools at the time of testimony versus actual revenues for schools that is given to the district? And in part, my question is about whether you have issues around long-term fiscal planning, that you are not able, and you acknowledge that you are not able to accurately project what those costs were and how they thus obligated you or impacted your promised obligation to the School District of Philadelphia. Again, another reason why I think that this question of an outside management evaluation may be necessary, because you are not able to accurately project. And how are we going to make sure that you are able to accurately project what is actually given towards schools?
I think that is not a correct characterization of what we have presented. Every budget document has to begin with certain assumptions. The assumptions that we made when we testified before City Council was that there would be a certain trend in the expenses that we had. That for reasons completely out of our control and with information that was not provided to us from anyone, our obligations to the pension plan skyrocketed. There was no way we could have anticipated that. We carefully reviewed every single element of the proposals that we had there. Based on the information that we had available at that time, we made decisions. When the city makes budget preparations, there are certain assumptions that they made built on what economic activity there will be and all of those things. When in 2007, before the huge financial crisis ensued, the city had certain projections about how their revenues were going to come in and what their expenses would be. That fell apart for reasons that were totally out of their control. The same thing is what happened here. We came in and gave you honest information on what we reasonably believed would happen. The fact that there were things that we did not anticipate and could not have anticipated happened does not mean that we were disingenuous in the information that we provided to you.
Do you think you would assist from an independent evaluator then to help you with long-term fiscal planning to be more accurate around some of these projections?
I can't respond to that. There are discussions that need to be made at the board level, and I can't respond to that.
I'm just suggesting that this has not been a unique kind of situation. So it's something where I want to be clear that from my personal point of view, that the parking authorities has an obligation to do many different things. But from a School District of Philadelphia perspective, it has a major impact on school funding. We brought it to the table. You have an obligation to the School District of Philadelphia. You know that. I think you've tried to meet that in the past, but that without some significant attention to the issue, that obligation has slipped significantly. That's my point of concern, and I think it's more of a one where I'm interested in applying some significant oversight and dialogue. Had the School District of Philadelphia dollars had continued on a general upward projection, I don't think that it would have triggered so much curiosity and interest and engagement around this issue. But I don't doubt that decline and a lack of attention to this and a lack of commitment about where the school district money would go would generate significant more interest and a need for more oversight, which, is going to happen at some point, but it could be a lot more collaborative. And I guess I'm looking for collaboration from the parking authority on this issue of attention to school district finances outside of a projected rate increase that you may want to ask, but, again, given your past history and not being able to project accurately what the revenues may be at the end of a rate increase, it raises a lot of concerns about your ability to accurately project this. So if we are to go down some road together, it would be very important for us to have a collaboration on this, to look attentively and to understand that the priority is to see the School District of Philadelphia revenues increase at a rate that is projected accurately by the parking authority, and that we hold you to that, even if it's not enshrined in law. I think that would be fair, and it would be collaborative.
We have no response to that.
No more.
Okay, thank you. Councilman O?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fennerty or any of your staff, so from the testimony that's been provided, it's clear that the parking authority has different functions, many of which are governed by different laws, whether it be federal, state, and different relationships, including with the city of Philadelphia in various ways, and indirectly or directly with the school district. If the parking authority were completely under city control, if it were, and the state laws were not in place to require funds and fees to go outside of the city of Philadelphia, what additional amount of dollars on an annual basis could you average or estimate that the city would receive from the operations of the parking authority?
Well, Mr. O, with all respect, are you referring to all of the divisions?
All divisions.
Okay. Well, if I may answer, if the city were in control, okay, the money would still go to the airport under federal law.
No,
Okay.
well, not the federal law. So let me correct that. The aviation fund, you know, it goes, the amounts required to go to the aviation fund for the airport, airport is still the city, but I'm talking about the funds that, for example, under the red light camera, under the live stop, under all these type of other state laws that send a portion of the money out of Philadelphia. What portion of the money reasonably? I mean, livestock would require fees to go out no matter what we did. But in terms of like red light camera or other types of items, if the city were running the parking authority, would there be an increase in amounts of money that the city would receive or not?
I don't believe so, sir. The red light camera statute would still be what it is. You can't run red light cameras without a state statute. There is no livestock money that goes to the state. That money is retained here to run livestock. In actuality, we get $10 for every moving violation that carries points back from the traffic court by state statute. So that is a part of the ticket fee, and we get roughly in the livestock division. Right now, I'm doing this from memory, so excuse me if I'm wrong, $600,000 or $700,000 a year to support the livestock. If we didn't have the split from livestock, the money that comes in, it would be less money that would go over to the city and the school district. So having livestock, it's a great program. Okay, it does push down the amount of costs that are charged to the on-street division. So there really wouldn't be much of a change in how it is. The only thing it would be if there wasn't a statute saying this to the city and this to the school district, the whole pot would go to the city, and then the city general fund would disperse whatever it would seem fit to the school district. So the way the statute is running now, okay, is written now, excuse me, the school district is guaranteed a percentage of money from the parking authority. If that statute weren't there, it would all go to the general fund. And Mr. Dixon may have more to elaborate on. He is by far the expert on that.
The only revenue that the parking authority takes that goes anywhere outside of the city is the red light camera funds. And so the city gets half of that money back in grants. So I don't know what potential additional money it could gain, but that has nothing to do with the governance of the parking authority. That's the way state law established that program. And the city had no ability to establish that program absent state law. So it really has no control over where those funds go. But they are the only funds that go anywhere outside of the city of Philadelphia.
So the red light camera program is the only program which takes a portion of the monies, according to the article that was distributed, 5.5 million in the city, and another portion, I don't know, 5.2 or something, outside of the city.
Yes, of the parking authorities, of the programs that the parking authority operates, yes.
And the parking authority, so one, at least from my perspective, is that the legislation that establishes the red light camera, which requires that 50% of the funds go to PennDOT and then into a grant program, takes a portion of the money, about half of the Philadelphia money outside of our city. And the parking authority, as an entity, has its own mission, separate and apart from the interests of the city, for example.
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as separate and apart from the city. Actually, our mission statement references the city and the state. It's the mission of the Philadelphia Parking Authority is to continually enhance the quality of life in Philadelphia through our strategic partnership with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the city of Philadelphia, and then goes on. I mean, our relationship with the city of Philadelphia is fundamentally important to what we do. We are an arm of the city government into the extent that we manage a very scarce resource, which is on-street parking in the city. I mean, we're never going to have any more curb space than we have. The way that we manage this is incredibly important to the city's economic activity, and our relationship with the city colors all of the decisions that we make in that regard.
Do you think it makes no difference whether, for example, the mayor appointed everyone on the board, or the governor appointed everyone on the board, or the current situation where the governor and some of the legislators, does it make no difference?
Well, Councilman, from where I sit, my job is, I mean, for 33 years, nearly 33 years, I've been an employee of the Philadelphia Parking Authority. I was an employee when the city appointed the board. I've been an employee since the governor appointed the board. My job is to do the best that I can to implement sound parking management principles to enhance this region's economic vitality. That's my job. It is basic, to me, it's irrelevant who appoints the board, as long as whoever the board is buys onto that mission. I mean, as an employee and as a leader of this agency, I would be uncomfortable with the board that said that the only reason for us to exist is to generate cash for any purpose, whether it's a school district or something like that, absent an understanding of what our public policy mission is. So, to me, that's irrelevant. They're political decisions that really don't have an impact on my life, only to the extent that all of the board members, both the way that those that were appointed by the mayor and those that are currently sitting, understand that we have a public policy responsibility to the people of Philadelphia. They are the people to whom we're ultimately responsible. And the way that we do our job in that regard is what's important to me.
All right, I appreciate that. The board members are appointed by different entities from the state. I'm friendly with a couple of them, and they don't have that kind of direct relationship to the city. They do indirectly through the state government, although the authority serves the city and the state's public safety interest. That's how I look at it. Is that different from how I should look at it?
It's different from how I look at it, Mr. O. We have a very good functioning board, and But not to contradict you, two of our board members, one is sitting to your right, and he certainly has a vested interest, Councilman Tautenberger has a vested interest and has worked very hard. Commissioner Schmidt, okay, also has a vested interest to see that the Parking Authority works with city government, as he is an elected city official. Our other board members are Joseph Ashdale, who's the chairman, okay, who is a labor leader, and he has a vested interest in making sure that our city survives, so that the people that he is employed by, his union members, have work in the city, and there's peace in the city, and there's economic vitality, so therefore the city prospers and the Parking Authority helps that. Our other members are all very educated people. One is a lawyer who lives in Center City, Mr. Stutzman. Russell Wagner, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Holy Redeemer Health Systems. I believe that is his title. He oversees our audits and our finances. And then there is Dr. Wrigley, who is a super educated lady, and she owns her own business as an optometrist. But we have a board, they interact with us, we have subcommittees, they all live in Philadelphia, they all work in Philadelphia, and they all do have vested interest here. They're good appointees, they oversee us well, okay? They listen to us, and they all take calls from elected officials, whomever would call them and call them back of any interest of concern. If I may take the liberty, I would ask Mr. Tautenberger, have I said everything which is 100% true here, sir? Or Councilman Tautenberger?
Thank you. That is correct.
Thank you.
Are any of the board members paid? Is it completely voluntary? Is it paid in part or full-time?
The chairman gets a salary, and the board members, excluding Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Tautenberger, are each paid $200 a meeting. What it comes out to them hourly, I would say they probably make less than 50 cents an hour for each hour they put in. And Mr. Tautenberger and Mr. Schmidt, as salaried employees, elected officials, do not take any per diem stipend for the many meetings they attend.
Yes, I understand. I'm not certainly casting any doubts or aspersions on the fact that people get a per diem or compensation, anything. I'm just asking the question as it comes up. How about the salary for the chairman?
$75,000.
Okay. And the parking authority, since the time of its takeover by the state, has increased its function, has it not?
Yes, it has, sir.
Mostly under state legislation, I thought. Is that correct or incorrect?
Mostly under state legislation, but we have changed the way we run our garages and saved millions of dollars per year by eliminating unnecessary contractors that we paid a fee to.
Okay. And would you say that the parking authority has improved its technology and its equipment?
Yes, immensely.
Okay. So that is and I'm not saying not legitimate, but that is a capital outlay. What has been the increase in the capital outlay of the parking authority since the takeover?
I would ask Mr. Dixon to answer that question, sir.
In terms of the investment in on-street parking technology, it was about $10 million for the kiosks. Is that, $11 million for the kiosks. I can't remember. Frankly, that question leaves me a little unprepared. I wasn't anticipating that. They were about $11 million. There's upgrading tow trucks, equipment like that, but that's just routine kinds of things. But in addition to that, we have invested about $25 million in upgrades at the airport parking facility, with another significant investment contemplated to add technology that will improve both the public's use of that facility, as well as ensuring the integrity of the facilities. We're investing $15 million in upgrades of Center City parking garages. So there have been significant capital investments. I don't know that they're related to the change in governance or just, things that we need to do, but yes, there have been investments in technology that both for addressing the structural integrity of our facilities, applying technology to both improve our efficiency and the effectiveness of the service we deliver.
And commensurate, there's been an increase in the number of personnel, is that correct?
Actually, there's been an increase in the number of personnel related to some of the expansion activities. However, over the last 7 years, as I indicated before, there's been an overall reduction in the personnel by, I think, close to around 70 people that result both from technology changes, more efficiency, those kinds of things. Every vacancy that occurs, there's a conversation that takes place as to whether or not the function, every vacancy, there's a conversation that takes place as to whether or not the duties that that person were performing could be absorbed by other people, or whether it's necessary to fill that vacancy. It's very important that we try to maintain staffing levels for parking enforcement officers because, number one, if they're not out there enforcing, parking availability is decreased, but at the same time, if they're not out there enforcing, that's a decline in revenue because once that ticket is not written, it's not something like you can come back later and recapture it.
So I'm going to give you my impression of the review of all the financials that were made available to me, and I thank you for the additional, more detailed reports. And you could correct me if I'm wrong or tell me, how I should look at this. At least from the limited information that I have, I see that the parking authority is collecting more revenues over the years, and its costs are increasing in its operation, which is normal. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the end result is that I don't see, I see a consistency in collections and growth. I see growth in administration and personnel. I see an expansion of roles, but I see that the city gets a certain amount of money, but not more than a percentage equal to the growth of the parking authority itself. And I don't see any consistency in the school district money. So, the school district kind of comes up, goes down by a pretty significant percentage. You've explained the reasons why. But, I guess that is where I'm trying to see if there's a predictability of growth, despite, all the things you said, the people visit, the snowstorm, the blizzard, and things like that. But can you explain that perception on my part as to whether it's correct, incorrect, what part I'm missing?
Well, I think part of it goes back to the initial statement that I made in that to view the parking authority's overall revenues as a big lump is not a fair analysis of the way the parking authority actually works. Since each of those business units has different rules, to look at growing revenue growth in certain areas and then assume that all of that would then go back to increased payments to the city is not accurate. So, for example, all of the revenue from the 2nd and Sansom Street garage has nothing to do with the city. That's a contract with the federal government. They get all that money. So that's like $5 million a year. That looks like an increase in growth in authority revenues, but it's not related to the city at all. But if you look at the chart that I gave you before, going back to 1992, the percentage of revenue from the off-street program that goes back to the city or the school district, aside from like some crazy years, 92 was 30%. The peak was 36%. In the last several years, it's gone 37, 38, 41, 41, 39, 37, 36. So the return on the gross revenue from the on-street parking program is actually pretty much at record highs for the like, over 20 years, for 20 years. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens through hard work. Because of the way that the calculation is of the money of the school district, unfortunately, they get squeezed at the end of the day. We are really looking at mechanisms now where we can do revenue enhancements that will level that out. The way the law is written, for every increase in gross revenue in the on-street parking division, the city gets the first bite at it. So as long as we have the law structured that way, it's going to be a constant challenge. But I promise you, it's a challenge that we take seriously, and we continually try to overcome.
Thank you. The controller's not here, but you may be familiar with his 2009 report audit, and it's from 2009. I understand we're in 2016, so that's 7 years ago. And in 7 areas that I had read his testimony, there was a need for improvement. Can you address how, if at all, the operation has been improved, or was he incorrect in his audit report? And if you need me to, I'll just kind of go through the 7 categories.
It would be helpful to go through the 7 categories, but let me know just an overall statement about his 2009 audit. We had significant disagreements with some of the findings in the audit. We had submitted information to the Controller's Office that responded to some of the concerns that were raised there. They never made it into the audit, but I can't control that. I can respond to a couple of things that I remember clearly. One was the amount of debt service that was issued, that was mentioned. None of that debt service that he talked about had anything to do with the on-street parking program, number one. Second element of it was there were 3 programs, three debts that were taken on by the parking authority at the request of the city of Philadelphia to foster economic development programs. One was the Disney Quest project at 8th and Market. One was the empty lot that is now the Family Court building at 15th and Arch, and one was a development project at 19th and Walnut Streets. Each of those carried significant debt, and the revenues of the parking authority were pledged to pay that debt, even though our role in them was minimal at best. We explained those things to the controller at that time. One of the things that would have, in terms of the issue dealing with the on-street program, one of the things that the city did was when we purchased on their behalf the lot at 15th and Arch Street, they pledged the revenue from the on-street parking program to pay the debt service on that lot. So there were all kinds of things that happened in relationship with the city that led to that increased debt load. Some of it we're still dealing with, like the Disney Quest project. We still own that property, and the city covers some of the debt service associated with that. So there were unusual circumstances that dealt with some of the levels of debt that we explained to them that were not just related to parking programs, but were part of the city's overall economic development plan. I can't remember some of the other things that were in there.
Since the takeover in 2001, when the board changed, the Philadelphia Parking Authority has not initiated or began or participated in any type of bond issues or economic activity taken on. These were things which we inherited, Councilman O. And we now have a family court, okay? That debt is paid off. We successfully sold the properties at 19th and Walnut Street, and we paid the bond off to that. I believe we paid back this is about 10 years ago. I believe we paid back the city for some investment, and then there were some profit because we made the choice to sell it at the right property, right time. That money was designated and has been spent on improving the parking authority garages.
Councilman Gimm?
Just a quick question and a request. Does the parking authority do MWBE do you have reports on MWBE participation, minority contracting, and also on your staff ratios?
Yes.
Okay, is that something you could provide to City Council?
Sure.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman O.
Thank you very much. In terms of the operation of PPA, is there, a base cost, like a foundational amount, that as it grows, profitability would grow, more money would go to the city, more money would go to the school district? Or is it that the nature of parking industry is that as it grows, costs grow, revenues, collections increase, but the profit margin relatively stays about the same?
Well, look, if I could just give some historic data on how we've been trying to deal with that. Since 2004, gross revenue went up about 55%. Direct expenses went up 42%. I mean total expenses went up 42%. If we took out the pension payment, our total expenses, absent pension, went up 22%. So costs over which we have no control are the ones that are having the most negative impact on what we're doing. So if our revenue went up 55% and our costs only went up 12%, which is what it was without pension, there would be significantly more money available for the school district. But these are things that are just part of the cost of doing business.
Yeah, well,
I know that you're dealing with that as a city because your numbers are substantially larger than even ours. So you know what the issues are there with that. There's no formula that says, in the parking industry, if you increase revenue by 20%, you're going to have a return of 22% or whatever that is, because there are always costs associated with it. All I can tell you is that we are committed to ensuring the lowest escalation of expenses that we possibly can. Consistent, again, I go back every time, consistent with the mission that we have in terms of providing parking services to the city and the public.
Just to add to that, which is not any reason why our revenues go down, but it is there, a factor. If you run around Center City right now and you see the construction, for instance, I don't know, Councilman, if you go down 2nd Street where they were tearing down the building on the east side, that whole block was taken out of service, of kiosk service. A meter in that area generates roughly $26 a day. Okay, for a period of a year, it is about $12,000. And that area could even be a little bit more because it's late night. Every time a space is taken out of service for construction, although we're getting jobs for contractors and jobs for construction workers, we're losing money when they're out. Every time you see a dumpster in place, okay, we're losing that revenue. If you go to the Reading Terminal Market, we have lifts parked that contractors just dropped them. That takes money away, and that takes money away from what would be the city and the school district. There's other mitigating factors that apply here, things like that. We estimate right now, Corinne may know, we got a couple hundred parking spaces out of commission in Center City because of construction. We're getting taxes on other things, but that doesn't come through the parking authority. We also have our partner that never gets mentioned in writing parking tickets is the police department. There is a budgeted amount that we hope to see, that if looking at the trends of issuance with the police department over the years and every year. We have placed that down every year. We're hoping, working with Commissioner Ross, that police officers, when they come upon, okay, someone parked on a hydrant or double parked, okay, or parked in a handicap zone, that if they have the time and are not on a call, they would start writing those tickets again. We'll handle all the meters. We'll handle all the safety violations. We'll handle, all of that in Center City. Okay, when you get to the outlying areas, it's where we need our partners, a little more help from the police department than we're getting, because we can't answer those calls for the gentleman on the fire hydrant or the lady in the handicap zone or that. So we are working with the police commissioner. We have met with the mayor to try to push the knowledge. If you have time, crime is first, police calls are first, backing up your officers are first, their safety is first, and answering citizens is first. But if there is time and you come upon a double parker, that you take the training be redone and go, let's move back a few years and write that ticket. So we are working very hard, okay, to make sure that we maximize our cost, maximize our revenue and minimize our cost. And if any member of City Council would want to come down and go through any of our expenses with us for a half an hour or a full day, we're always open to welcoming you down, and we'll go over any questions anybody has. There's nothing that is not transparent, and would be very glad to do that.
All right, thank you very much. I don't have any other questions, but I'll just summarize, at least from my perspective, that what you have testified to is that the operation of the parking authority under the state control is operating to your satisfaction in the best interest of the city, that it is as efficient as you can make it, that the amounts of revenues to the city and the schools are where you believe it should be, and that there is not much likelihood that you see that the money to the schools or the city is going to increase as it is. For reasons that are beyond your control, which are the pension costs and other things, the amount needed, about $6 million, resulted in ultimately a inability to provide $7.5 million to the schools, and there are other reasons why there's going to be a $3.5 million decrease in fiscal year 2017 to the schools, and that the red light camera in fact provides no funds directly to the city or the schools, but that under state law about 50% goes outside the city. The rest will come to the city so long as the city applies for it. That is an understanding that somehow has been crafted between the city and the state through state legislation.
The 50% that comes back, you had said it's by statute. I believe, sir, that's by agreement, okay, and not statute. And the other thing, if I may just add, and I'm not correcting you, there is always room for improvement. Okay, we don't say we're perfect. There is always room for improvement. Each of the three of us that sit here, and Corinne runs the on-street operation. We basically run the administration. There is always room for improvement. And I am not saying that it will only be $8 million to the school district. We have a bill, an ordinance that we would like to have introduced that will make up some of this, make up all of it, actually give more money to the school district. As with any business, which Mr. Dixon said, we can't increase our prices unless we come to this body. Our costs increase because labor costs increase by contract, okay, goods costs increase by contract. Everything we do is increasing. We have to come back, okay, for more money. And one of those things may be a $5 per ticket increase. Meter rates may need to go up a little bit. and a few other items which we have discussed with the administration. If those remedial measures are taken, and we haven't come to council for except the 50 cents in the outlying areas, if those remedial measures are taken in a positive manner by council, okay, the school district will get much more than $8 million. And we have that planned out, but we need to act on it soon. And that decision has to be made, because if council, if we were to get it in, and I don't know if council meets next week, but if we got it, council doesn't meet next week, I'm told that it's almost impossible then, Mr. Squilla is shaking his head, for us to get it in and pass before the end of June. So that's another quarter which is missed. We need to get a sponsor who will look at this, introduce it, and possibly get it moved on the fast track. And we've brought all that to the administration's attention. And it's a partnership with the administration. Councilman Kenny introduced, when he was here, many bills increasing many bills for the parking authority. Councilman Squilla has. Councilman Toltenberger has not been here long enough. You have, sir, as well as former Councilman DeChico. This time, with a new administration, we have a better relationship with this mayor than we've had with any previous mayor, and we work through the administration in order to get an increase, rather than just go randomly. Everything is a team effort. It's ran by Mr. DeBow and his staff, and we've made a recommendation, and I truly hope it can get introduced. It will receive favorable consideration, and like any business, we need to increase our prices because our expenses have increased, so our net profit can stay the same, or in this case, increase.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I do apologize, because I think I did say that there's possibly a council session next week, which I was informed by my staff that there wasn't one. So I did think we had one more session in place, but we don't, and I apologize for that. One quick question, because I got to run too, but when you do residential permit parking and or commercial corridor parking, and it stops at midnight, is there any way that they could do that after midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m.?
Well, it's the issue always is having staff available to enforce it. And we've, in certain situations that presented a particular problem, we have had people on enforcing after midnight. It's not frequent. And we try to tailor the regulations in such a way that we're trying to address a parking need. I don't know that there are that many areas where we would need after midnight. We did respond to some police requests to
in some of our entertainment districts where we have the activity late night, and I think we would like to work with you on that and see if
it's certainly something we could look at, but we'd need to do it in a way that we could actually respond to that need and provide the enforcement that people would expect.
Well, enforcement make things work, and
just so I could add, if we do that, and we start running a dozen officers or so after midnight in response to the need from the citizens, naturally, with that, I would probably request that we look at an increase of a few dollars on the residential parking permits to cover a cost of additional personnel or overtime, which we would have to pay to do something like that.
I think we would work with you. I want to reach out to the authority to see if we could do that in a certain area in my district, to see if you guys could work with us.
When we take more and more on, and which we're willing to do, because I do think your point is valid, I have to cover the cost, so I'm not back here.
Yeah, I mean, we need people working that shift, obviously, and if there's no enforcement, then we know what happens when there's no enforcement.
Chaos breaks out.
Well, I just want to say, too, and I know it said earlier, the efficiency of the parking authority is something that's envied and hated at the same time, so you guys do a great job out there, and I know when you're 3 minutes late for a meter, you do get a ticket, and sometimes I wish it didn't happen, but it does, and if all our departments work like that, it would be great. The city would be in a better place. So thank you all. This will end the hearing and the call of the chair, and everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.